Well, it looks like it's about that time. So let's get this show underway. Hi, everybody. Fred Jacobs, Jacobs Media in Detroit. Hope you're all doing well on what is a beautiful spring day here in the Motor City. We are thrilled to be able to show you our key findings. In fact, we are dubbing them this year the Big Eight, which for those of you with a radio background, you know there's a certain resonance to that. For those of you who haven't been around forever like I have. It's just eight key findings, so we'll kind of leave it there. But we're thrilled you could be here. We've got a big presentation that will be very fast moving. I'm going to try and get you in and out in 1 hour. That is my goal. If in the event you have to leave or you feel like you've seen all of this before, go ahead. We are recording this, as you probably just heard, and everybody who registered in for this will end up getting the recording tomorrow. I've got a couple of thank yous and an introduction to make. I'd like to thank Inside Radio, who partnered with us again this year to help us generate station participants. It worked pretty well, as you will see, so thank you to them. And also thanks to Q and Steve Newberry, who once again are sponsoring Techsurvey for this year. And in fact, I can introduce you to not a bot, but the real Steve Newberry, CEO of Q. Hi, Steve. Glad you could be here today.
Thank you, Fred. Glad to be here. And let me just very briefly say, it is always such an opportunity for the industry to see the results of the tech survey. Fred, Paul, and the entire team at Jacobs are treasures to the industry. They've been giving us insights and information for many, many years. And the fact that Q can be a part of this, I'm a firm believer that our industry can make better decisions with the most information we have about what's really going on, not what our perceptions are, but what the realities are. And tech survey sure gives us a lot of information to see insights how people use our products, use others' products, and it's a great roadmap for the future. So, Fred, as always, thank you for doing all this work and all the amount of accumulation that you do. It's phenomenal. Q's glad to be a part of it. And with that, I'll step aside and let you give this great information to the folks that have joined us today.
Appreciate that, Steve, and thanks again for being part of this year's tech survey. Before I actually get going with the data, I actually have a disclosure that I want to reveal to everybody. I made the mistake last night of looking through the names of people on the spreadsheet who had signed up to sit in on this today. And as I'm going through the list, I run across a name. It is my primary professor from Michigan State University. I won't go into the year, but it is decades ago. And this was the guy who basically taught me everything I knew about research methods. So think about the pressure on me here. It's not the CEOs that I'm worried about. It's this one guy whose name I will not reveal. But if I get a grade at the end of this thing, it won't be a surprise. And all I can say is I hope it is a pass-fail course, because that's probably my best shot. So yeah, this is our 22nd year of Tech Survey. We started doing these in 2004, 2005. And if you think back to what was going on in the world at that time, it was really an amazing time in terms of technology and ultimately our culture. Facebook was becoming available to everybody, not just college students. And the iPhone was on the borderline of coming out. It was YouTube's debut. I mean, really an incredibly interesting time to actually start doing this survey. And the premise of this survey was always the same. It was to try and find out what were radio listeners doing when they weren't listening to the radio. Now, we've obviously evolved quite a bit since then. And as our stakeholders will tell you, we have quite a few more questions this year than we used to have. But bottom line is the basic integrity of this survey has really not changed a bit. We're kind of investigating the same things we always have. So let me jump into the methodology first. Always key to understand how the survey was done. Overall, we had 506 stakeholder stations from commercial radio throughout the U.S. No participation from Canada this year, unfortunately. You can read into that anything you like, but we miss them, and we hope they come back next year. In spite of that, we had a really strong showing in terms of completed surveys, almost 31,000, as you can see. Interview dates are pretty much the same every year. We try to do this at the exact same time of the year every year, first week in January through the first week in February. Just about everybody, and here's a key point, is a member of their station, radio station database. Some stations put up a link on their websites or social media pages, but for the most part, they receive an email asking them to take part in this confidential survey, and the stations never get to see the names, etc., of these people. So that's all protected stuff. Neither do we, by the way. It's an online survey. The only weighting that we do is against the population. So, for example, 400 surveys from a large market in Chicago are going to count more than 400 surveys from a smaller market like Chattanooga. So that's the weighting story. Um, this is something to wrap your head around a little bit. There's always stations coming and stations going every year. When you've got this big a base of stations participating, there is a certain amount of in and outflow. But we had more than usual this year. And so let me tell you why. I guess the 800-pound gorilla in the room has an A on his chest, which stands for Odyssey. They jumped in this year after a pretty significant gap in time, and it was great to get them back in, and they got in a very big way. So, you know their station group. There's a lot of really great stations and a lot of major market radio stations as well. And we think they tipped the responses from question to question. Not many of them, as a matter of fact. You can really see a great deal of consistency, but there are some that just moved around a little bit. I'll point that out as we go through it. And here's the big caveat. Unlike a survey like the Infinite Dial, this one does not match up to the population, 1,000 perfectly stratified respondents matching up in gender and age and ethnicity. These are just fans of radio who are part of station email databases, and that's kind of the representation there, if you will. I think it's always key to understand what your P1s are thinking, your biggest fans, and this survey is really a big reflection of that. And in fact, you will see the term P1, which always refers to people who came in through whatever station actually invited them to take the survey. So that gets that out of the way. Let's get to the color bar chart. Hopefully you aren't colorblind. If you go all the way to the top, you can see the blue crosshatch bar always represents the average for Techsurvey 2026. So this one is usually based on a lot of people. And then we have our format bars as well, again, all color-coded. And these were all the formats that actually qualified enough for breakouts. There are many other formats represented here, but we felt not enough completed interviews or not enough different radio stations participating to be able to actually publish format results. But we do have them for this group here, obviously some pretty popular formats, so they will make an appearance from time to time. So again, in keeping with the Big Eight, we've got 8 big takeaways here that I'm going to power through this hour. I think these are really the big things that really jumped out at me, and hopefully they will be of interest to you as well. And I'm going to review them at the very end of the survey. Quickly, the sample here, and the bottom line with the sample, and this has been the case the last many years, as you will see. I've got it trended out for you the last 4 years, but the sample is aging because radio is aging. Uh, just about everybody's radio station and certainly their email databases are aging. But we also do surveys just like this one in public radio and Christian music radio. And in fact, we're seeing the exact same trend line happening there as well. So take a look at these age pie charts going back to 2023 on the far left, all the way up to this year on the far right. And the one thing that you're going to notice is the purplish slice at around 7 to 10 o'clock on every one of these pies, people who are 65 years of age and older. This is a significant group of people here. In most cases, back to 2023, it was about 1 in 4 respondents, all the way up to this year, 2026, it's 1 in 3. So you can definitely see the age factor there. And if you look at average age at the bottom, that's where the story is told. So back in 23, the average age was about 55 and a half. The next year it went up about a year to more than 56 and a half. The year after that, it hit 58. And this year we are looking at 58 and nearly a half. So yeah, if you're kind of doing your radio math here, I mean, here we've been talking about the 25 to 54-year-old demographic for a long, long time in radio, and the fact the average listener in Techsurvey is quite a bit above now, 54 years of age. Here's how they break down by generation this year. Obviously, boomers are the plurality there. There's more of them than any other generation. That's 45% of the sample are boomers. 2% are members of the greatest generation, so people born before 1946. But we do have a good mix of Xers, millennials, more than 1 in 10, which is good to see. And we also have a nice group of Gen Zs here, which you will see from time to time. In fact, there's about 455 of them, and they really tell a very interesting story, as you will see. But thinking about the aging of radio, Odyssey and other companies have been talking for quite a while now about how the 55 plus audience is still very viable and getting back into technology. Infinite Dial made a big point of that this year. And we dove into our data to see if the same thing was going on. And in fact, it is. So what I decided to do was go back to COVID. There it is, 2021. That was the first year for us because the 2020 survey you would think was during COVID, but remember it was Jan-Feb of that year. So we just missed the pandemic, thank goodness. So 2021 was sort of our first COVID year. So I've got all of these different technology measures here going back for the past 6 years. So the first one is streaming video on a weekly basis. Here's how our 55 plus audience looks for streaming video. So you can definitely see it is clearly trending upwards. Channels or platforms like Netflix and Hulu, Disney Plus, etc. Smart TV ownership, you can see the rise that it has taken, 16 points since 2021. This is real significant. A lot of people went out and bought smart TVs during COVID to make sure that as long as we're going to be stuck at home, let it be a good picture and great sound, right? Then there's streaming audio weekly, which has also had a real nice bit of growth. I mean, it's pretty remarkable when you think about 72% of people over the age of 55 streaming audio on a weekly basis or more often. What about downloading their station's app? Again, 10-point growth just over the past 6 years. Smart speaker ownership. This is important because radios are disappearing from people's homes. So they've got to listen, hopefully, to your radio station on some device or gadget. It could be a mobile phone, but it could be Alexa or a Google Home. And you can see that has also gone up, in fact, precipitously since last year. A real nice kick for smart speakers in this survey. And we think it may have something to do with Amazon upgrading Alexa. Clearly gotten smarter and I think a nicer voice, actually. And then in-car media system ownership, that has also gone quite a bit higher, certainly since 2021, 13-point increase during that time. And then finally, AI, using it on a weekly basis. Now, we don't go all the way back to 2021 because ChatGPT is just about 3 or so years old, but we do have it going back 3 years. And look at how 55 plus core radio listeners are using AI on a weekly basis. It's almost up 5x in just 3 years, from 3% to 14%. So when you think about seniors, when you think about ARP members, when you think about people who are out of demo, who have gone over the demographic cliff, how many other ways can I possibly say that? You can definitely see when it comes to technology how viable they are. Now, I won't even get into all the buying and consumerism and all that kind of stuff because you can read that anywhere, but that's how Techsurvey kind of gives us a look at what is going on. So, irony of ironies, this next question is a new question because it's something we picked up in focus groups when we would talk to younger people, and we thought, you know what, let's quantify it in the next tech survey. So, check out this agree disagree question. And there's many agree disagreeers in tech survey. We use a 5-point scale. Yes, I was taught that way. 5 indicates strongly agree, 1 indicates strongly disagree. You can go any number in between. So here's the statement. You can see it at the bottom of the pie. I find myself moving away from digital music and yearning for the days when music was analog and physical on vinyl, cassette, etc. So who thinks that way? Who is actually pushing back now against digital at this point in time? So you can see 12% strongly agree, 19% agree. We add that together, little rounding down there. 3 out of every 10 people agree or agree strongly with that statement. Women a bit more likely than men, but look at the generations, and that's why I said irony of ironies. It's the Gen Zs who actually feel like they've missed out on something by not being a part of the original vinyl explosion. And that's why we definitely see a lot of teens buying turntables or investing in cassette decks or that kind of thing. So interesting when we look at either end of the 25-54 spectrum in radio. So let's start out our big 8 takeaways, if we will, with I think a really important one. We use the Net Promoter Recommendation Score every year. I stayed at the Dolphin Hotel in Orlando last week for a conference that Paul and I attended. And literally, by the time we landed back home, in our email box was a survey from the hotel essentially asking us if we would recommend the Dolphin to a friend, family member, or coworker. Everybody uses the Net Promoter Score. All the big companies and corporations do. You've probably filled it out yourself many times. And we've been using it in Techsurvey from the very beginning, from the jump. So we've got this actually going back a long, long time. And I think it's a really important measure. I mean, it's one thing when you find a radio station through a billboard or an advertisement, but it is a much more meaningful way when a person in your life says, hey, I'm listening to something that I think you would enjoy. So let's take a look at the Net Promoter Scale. The way it works is this. On a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend the station that sent you the survey? 10 is extremely likely. 0 is not at all likely. Any number in between works. So if you look at the scale, you can see it's a very high bar. In order to be considered a promoter, you've got to give the radio station a 9 or a 10. That's it. 7s and 8s actually get tossed. They may be on the cusp, but they're not quite there. And then a detractor is a 0 through 6. So the little formula is down here at the bottom. You take your promoters, your 9s and 10s, you subtract the detractors, your 0s through 6s, and you've got your Net Promoter Score. So let's look at NPS, Net Promoter Scores, for Techsurvey 2026, and actually a lot of older ones as well. Look all the way to the left. You'll see the very first Techsurvey that we did back in 2005. We had a Net Promoter Score of 42. And then you can see over the years, it kind of bounces around from the late 30s. There was a real nice jump in 2010 when it shot up to 48, fell back down, came back up to 49. And moving right along, look at where COVID happened, where I just put that dotted line there. And you can see there was a really measurable jump there. First time we ever had a 50 score for commercial radio. It was exciting, and we think one of the reasons for that is people realized during COVID just how important their local communities were. Even though the disease may have started thousands of miles away, It was being felt in local schools, local restaurants, you name it. It was really a local issue, right down to where can I buy toilet paper, right? And so radio, by and large, did a really great job of reflecting what their communities needed. And a lot of people maybe rediscovered their radio station for the first time in a long time. So the Net Promoter Score shot up to 50. And since then, they've been kind of trailing down. And honestly, I've been concerned the last few years at the trend line that we've been on. And then we got the results for this year, and it went back up to 48. Now, I don't want to get euphoric oh, over a 2-point gain, although again, when you've got almost 31,000 people, it's hard to move this needle in any direction. So the 48 to me is very encouraging. It'll be great to see that replicate itself next year, and wow, maybe even go up a point or two. But this is a really good sign, and I think combined with some other findings, is really an indicator that radio's got a little bit of momentum, at least among its biggest fans. Here's the way Net Promoter actually breaks out. I just put a circle around our 48 there. So that is for the average commercial radio station. You see that right there in the middle of this chart, that blue crosshatch bar that I'm now cursoring over. So formats to the right did worse, did lower Net Promoter Scores. And you can see way down at the bottom there, sports and CHR. News Talk isn't a whole lot better. Very typical to see sports radio and news talk right in that same basic position every year. They do not do particularly well on this measure. And part of the reason why is that they do exceptionally well as radio stations with men. Men are quite a bit less likely to recommend anything, whether it's a radio station or a restaurant or a soda or what you name it. Formats to the left actually do better, and you can see our commercial radio format winners are hot AC, country, and adult contemporary. But look all the way to the left, and that's where you see Christian music radio. Look at that Net Promoter Score. You wonder why Christian radio is doing really well these days, and in fact, by all measures, it is. This is part of the reason why. The audience is very energized and very excited about these radio stations. They talk about them, they value them, they recommend them. And that 82 is really stellar. That is, we've been measuring them for about a dozen years, and that's the highest they've ever been. And then right below them comes public radio, where we also do a companion survey. Public radio has done better. Public radio has done worse, but is typically ahead of commercial radio as it is this year. A Net Promoter Score of 70 for public radio is pretty good. So we'll see what happens. They had a bit of a comeback this year as a result of the defunding event in Washington, D.C. about a year ago. At this time, the audience definitely has their backs, at least for now, and is supporting them with money and also good Net Promoter Scores. So that's good to see as well. This is one of my favorite questions in Techsurvey. Why do you listen to the radio? So these are for people the main reason why they say they listen. We give them this laundry list of possible assets down the left-hand side, and they tell us which of these are main reasons, secondary reasons, or no reasons at all for listening to the radio. So you're looking at the mains, and up on top, as it typically is every year, 2/3 say, I like listening to the radio because it's easiest to listen to in the car. Put a pin in that because it's actually getting harder to listen to the radio in a car, but we'll get there when it's time to get there. Number two, mentioned by more than 6 of every 10 people, is that radio is free, and in a subscription economy, that definitely makes a difference. But number 3 is very interesting. Personalities on the radio, mentioned by 6 of every 10 as being a motivating reason to listen. Then we get into a couple of the emotional reasons for listening. Habit, routine, part of my fabric of my life. I feel a connection with radio that maybe I don't feel with other media. And then at 53% are people who enjoy listening to the radio for the music. Favorite songs, favorite artists, that type of thing. So yeah, interesting, right? Personalities is 60, and music at 53. What's going on with that? Well, let's go back in time. Let's look at these same basic question going all the way back to 2014, and let's first plot the I like radio because of the personalities. And it is trending up over all these years, but not by leaps and bounds. It started at 57% back in 2014, and it's only at 60% today. So it's not like it has exploded over the past many years, but it is clearly, slowly but surely, moving its way upwardish and is at least with a number that begins with a six. It's the music that has really been altered in terms of how consumers prioritize music on their favorite radio stations. And back in 2014, 70% of our overall sample said, I like listening to the radio for the music and the artists that they play. That's down now 17 points to 53% year to year. So you'll notice the same thing that I noticed. Back in 2019, these two lines crossed, and personalities passed music for the very first time. And for the past 8 years, that hasn't changed. The gap has moved around a little bit, but it still hasn't changed in 8 consecutive years of Techsurvey. So personalities absolutely matter to fans. And if you're wondering, well, why has music actually ended up suffering as a result? And we think that a big reason why is that music has essentially become commoditized over the past many years. I mean, when you can basically have every song at your fingertips on a device that's the size of a pack of cigarettes, that's a real game changer for the way that people used to be able to listen to music, where radio was a primary source of that, and now a lot less primary than it used to be. All right, let's get to one of our key findings, number two. So how do we look at radio? Do we look at radio as a glass half empty or a glass half full? Well, unfortunately, your researcher here is a glass half empty kind of guy. Sorry. But that is, I'm always looking to try to figure out what's wrong and how can we make it better. So we looked at some of the reasons why radio is doing particularly well. What about why people who maybe aren't listening to as much radio are bailing or are certainly repelled by what's going on? So here's how we do that. We have a momentum question. We ask people in the last year, have you listened to more radio, less radio, or the same amount? And we divide the same amount up into two pieces because if somebody says, I've been listening to the same, that indicates, okay, your habits haven't changed, but do you listen a lot or a little bit? Well, you never knew. So we actually break up the same into those two categories. And I think the really good news here is that 6 of every 10 people say, I've been listening the same as last year a lot. So that's good to see. But when we look at the more and less up there in green and pink, it's also nice to see that there's a 6 point net positive for people who say they've actually increased their listening year to year. 16% more, 10% less. It doesn't usually work out quite so well. So this is definitely another one of those indicators, if you will, beyond Net Promoter, that radio had a pretty good year with its most core fans. But we isolate out that 10% who say, I've been listening less. We give them a list of potential negatives and we ask them to tell us what's driving this. Why aren't you listening as much as you were a year ago? All the way up to the top, you can see the smoking gun. 51%, a majority, say, I've been listening to less radio because I've been listening to non-radio sources more. And non-radio sources are things like satellite radio, like Spotify, like podcasts. So that's half the sample. So put a pin in that because we're going to actually take a little bit of a deeper dive. Reasons number two and number three are still the fumes of COVID, if you will. Those used to be bigger numbers going back 5 years ago. I spend less time in a car. Obviously, that's a huge result of COVID just slashing commute times and people who are even going into work. And then lifestyle change, a lot of that happened during COVID too. People moved, they changed jobs, they graduated from school, they left whatever they were doing to take care of aging parents, you name it. All those kinds of habit changes impact the way that people's routines get rocked. And radio, being part of people's routines, is going to be susceptible to that. But then look at all the green bars, starting with the top one. Too many commercials mentioned by 1 in 3 people who say they are listening to less radio. We know that's an issue, and here it is. And then we've got 4 in a row that are the exact same number. I'm just not enjoying the programming. Music's too predictable. Personality or show that I used to like is not no longer on in my local market, or I just don't hear the kind of music that I enjoy. So you can see there's a lot of, if you will, death by about 8 cuts there, getting in the way of people actually listening to more radio. But clearly, number one are these non-radio sources. So if you said that, and then go all the way up to the top to our blue crosshatch bar there, you can definitely see that's our 51%. Last year was at 50%, so hasn't changed all that much. But who is more susceptible to listening to audio on smart speakers or podcasts or satellite radio? Men are, as are progressively younger people to a great degree, right? You can definitely see that overall, the younger you are, the less radio you are going to be listening to, or at least you're going to be pointing to this as the key factor in why you're not listening more than you did. So I wanted to make sure you definitely saw that. All right, key finding number 3 in the Big Eight is the whole local vibe. So let's talk a little bit about that kind of sense of place and community. We have long believed this is part of, as I said here, radio's secret sauce. And in fact, the data have really reinforced that very heavily over the years. But we are seeing some connectedness variables beginning to shift downward, and I want to bring those to your attention as well. But let's start on the local piece here, if we could. Right, we've already seen this, right? People who say that radio is great because it's easiest to listen to in the car and it's free, number one and number two. We looked at personalities and music. So where does the local piece actually come in? There it is. That green bar shows you that 4 of every 10 people say, I like to listen to the radio because I can find out what's going on locally. Now, again, that's not in the 60s. It's not a steel sword. It's not one of those driving motivational reasons to listen, but it is clearly in the mix and it is clearly in the hunt. So let's dig in and actually see if we can suss it out. Here's an agree-disagree statement we've been asking forever. One of radio's primary advantages is its local feel. 53% strongly agree with that statement. And if we go back all the way to 2018, which I've done here upper right, you can definitely see it has generally been moving up, especially again since COVID. It's the same basic pattern here. COVID clearly rocked our worlds. We know that, but it rocked radio's world too, for better or for worse, in terms of how people use it, perceive it, and you can see that in a question like this. Strongly agree went up to 49% during COVID, then it shot up to 57, and now we're in the 53, 54 range. Pretty good. More meaningful to women than to men. And we see this in every survey that we do, whether it's in commercial, public, Christian, or even for non-radio clients. Younger people are more focused on community and what is going on in town. Older people have just settled in and they're going to just ride it out and retire. But younger people definitely root into a community. It means something to them. They want to go out and be a part of it, socialize with it, all of that stuff. And so we see these kinds of generational trajectories every time we ask about the importance of local. Here's another agree disagree. I feel a connection with local radio stations that I don't with other types of audio. This has also been going up pretty regularly as well. You can see I've got this one tracked since 2018 again, when it was just 49%. And now we're in the mid 50s, and we've actually been there for past 3 years. Pretty similar demographic patterns, right? There's women again, community focus, clearly more important to them. Gen Z falls off a little bit, but we definitely see some really strong looking numbers there for boomers, Xers, and of course, millennials. So again, just another indicator of that local piece. Here's the same question broken out by formats. So which formats are more likely to exude a stronger connection with its audience? Hot AC, far and away number one, followed by country, and then AC and rock just barely over average, but clearly above that 56% line. Here's another agree disagree. I would like to see the station that sent me this survey be more visible in my community. See that new banner upper left? Yep, this is a new question. We have asked this in public radio where this has kind of been a thing there for a couple of years, and I decided to move it over to this survey this year. So what happened with this one? 14% strongly agreed. 1 in 4 people agreed. You add those together. 4 of every 10 agree or agree strongly. They'd like to see their favorite station more out and about in the community. Who feels strongest about that? Yep. Now you're getting the idea. Women and progressively younger listeners clearly in the lead there. Here we've actually got it broken out by format so you can actually see how it shakes out across the format spectrum. Country and rock definitely right up there at number one, number two, very close together. And then slightly above average, classic hits, classic rock, and hot AC. And here's one of the ones where I'm scratching my head a little bit. Agree, disagree. I really feel a sense of connection to the station that sent me the survey. On the surface, this looks fine, right? More than a third strongly agree. Almost 4 of 10 agree with this statement. So that looks pretty healthy. But just isolating out the strongly agrees, which we've been doing all the way back to 2019. And we kind of had the typical COVID bump that even got higher. And then all of a sudden, last year, it began to slip down to 40%, and this year, 35. So I'm sitting here looking at this and I'm wondering, is this one of those wobbles? You know, they happen. They, they happen in the ratings. They can happen with any statistics here. So not quite sure, kind of putting a pin in this one and waiting until 2027 to see if this number comes back looking the same or gets better or, geez, maybe even gets worse. But again, when we look at people who agree about that sense of connection to their favorite radio station, it is led by women and younger people. So from that standpoint, it's running right into type. I mean, exactly the way it is on all these other connectedness questions, but just overall, the strongly agrees got softer this time around. The other point is, how does it do in the other surveys? When we actually look over to the right-hand side, you can see the two logos I popped up. In gold is the public radio tech survey, and the strongly agree percentage there is 44. And in that kind of tealish color there is the Christian music broadcaster survey, where that percentage is 48. So again, that's quite a bit higher than the 35% that we got in this survey this year. So we're going to need more research to figure out whether we've got something going on here that we need to look into. All right, big finding number 4. Yeah, the digital train isn't leaving the station. It left the station quite a while ago. And it continues to play a really huge role in how people are actually listening to our radio stations. This has traditionally been a very difficult thing for rating companies to measure, given their methodologies and all the other factors that get involved with the complicated concept of measuring listening when there are so many different platforms and devices out there. So the way we go at it is this. We ask people to think about their favorite radio station, the one that sent them the survey. We ask them to think back to the previous week. We give them a list of all the different platforms that they could hear the station on, and we give each one a drop-down menu so you can actually select the approximate percentage of time you spend on each of those platforms listening to that particular radio station. So let me show it to you for the entire almost 31,000 people. Here is the pie chart that we look forward to seeing every year. As we always see, the biggest slice of the pie is people listening to their favorite radio stations on a regular radio in the car. That is 37% of consumption. Now, this year, tied for number two. Number two is usually where my cursor is going, up to the top of the hour there in dark blue. 17% of consumption, regular radio at home, work, or school. That is usually a pretty solid number two. For the first time since we've been doing this, there's a tie for number two between that and people streaming their favorite station on a computer, both with 17%. But when we add together the regular radio listening here, either in a car or at homework or school, the 37 plus the 17, look at this box on the right. That's the 54% for broadcast. And digital is 44%. And digital's all these green slices that you see my cursor kind of going over here. The computer stream we talked about, 12% of consumption on the station or other mobile apps. 9% smart speakers, pretty impressive. 4% podcasts, 2% smart TVs. Yep, we're coming back to that. We have a question about people listening to audio on smart TVs. So 54-44 is the basic order here. So broadcast is still ahead of the way that people listen to your station, but not by a ton, right? 10 points. What was it last year, you asked? Last year, broadcast was 5 points higher and digital was actually 5 points lower. So there's been quite a bit of movement this year. But when we do the longitudinal analysis and go all the way back to 2013, when we were first asking this question in exactly this way, this is where you really see some amazing, amazing data. Let's start out with people listening to their favorite radio stations on regular radios. Now, back in 2013, all the way to the left, it was 85% of listening was done with regular radios, over the air, if you will. That has gone all the way down 31 points to 54% today, the all-time low. And you can see it's pretty much been heading down, down, down year after year after year. Now, conversely, let's plot the digital line. Pretty amazing. It's about 3x, if not more, higher. 14% back in 2013 were streaming their favorite radio station somewhere, all the way up to 44% today. So again, just truly a remarkable story here on one chart. If you go all the way back to the left, I've just kind of plotted the gap there between broadcast and digital back in 2013, 71-point difference. Now take a look at this year, only a 10-point gap. And when we actually break this out by some of our little demographic splits, you can definitely see some interesting things going on. Over the air isn't leading among everybody. In fact, if you look at Gen Z's upper left there, you can see that just by 1 percentage point, at least at the moment, they are listening to radio stations or their favorite radio station on digital devices. Millennials are reasonably close, as are Xers, and then you look down at the bottom to boomers and greatest, and again, older, more conservative, more traditional listeners. Over the air wins pretty decisively, especially with our greatest generation. Real quick, I thought I would show you how this looks by format. So there's two slides here just to accommodate all these pies, so you can kind of see what's going on in each of these little subworlds or subgenre worlds of radio. Broadcast hanging in there at most of these. On this slide, the highest digital usage is CHR, upper middle, as you can see there. And then we get to our second group of formats. And look at Hot AC upper left. It's pretty close. It's only a 4-point differential there. News Talk, much more conservative, leaning heavily over the air at 59%. But look at sports radio. And it's been this way for the past couple of 2 or 3 years, but sports radio people are just voracious when it comes to everything. They just have to know what is going on. So they've got all the devices in their cars, in their pockets, in their briefcases, whatever the case may be. But digital, well ahead of broadcast, 56 to 42% among sports fans. So that, in fact, is a big finding. All right. Speaking of big findings, here's number five. You'll hear me use this phrase way too much, meeting the audience where they are, but this is that idea of making sure that you make your content available wherever they are, and not just make it available, but make it available in a seamless, easy to use, clear application. That sounds easy. We have learned, I think, over the years, especially in radio, it's not easy to do at all. So the first thing I want to show you is how to not meet the audience where they are. How to meet the audience where they've left, I think would be probably the best way to put it. But we asked the question, do you have a working radio in your home that you use? Right now, remember, the, these are core radio listeners, right? Well, look at this timeline up here on top. We started out in 2018 when 83% had a working radio at home. That's all the way down now to 72% today, lower than it has ever been before. So again, these are core radio listeners, only about 72% of whom have a working radio at home that they use. This is why it is so important to make sure that you've got other devices that are dependable, that the audience knows how to use and find you on, and that they're going to get a great experience when they do so. I put an ugly red arrow near millennials down there at the bottom because, of course, they are least likely to have a working radio where they live. So if you are a veteran of tech surveys, you have been to the pyramids and back, you've survived. We started using the pyramid in the very first year that we did tech survey as a way to basically aggregate a lot of different data points onto one graphic. And we chose the pyramid because the media gadgets and activities that are at the bottom or base of the pyramid are the things they own or use or do the most. And then the things as the pyramid goes up and narrows are the media gadgets and activities that they own or use the least. So let's look at whoop, hello, there we go. Here is this year's pyramid for all 30,926 respondents. This stripe on the far right that I'm cursoring over is last year's totals. So if you go to the base of the pyramid down at the bottom where my cursor is now, you can see the number one media gadget or activity is in fact a gadget. People owning a smartphone, that's up to 95%. What was it last year? 94%. In fact, these four at the bottom, that's why I bracketed them there, are virtually unchanged last year to this year. Watching video or listening to the radio an hour a day or more, having a social media profile somewhere, those are all basically flat year to year. But anywhere that you see a thumbs up emoji indicates growth of 2 percentage points or higher. And you can see we have got a ton of thumbs up emojis here that clearly indicate some serious growth, right? So just take a look at some of these. Smart TV, very impressive. Streaming audio, streaming video, all up quite a bit. Hearables, by the way, are like AirPods or Bluetooth headphones. So that's pretty impressive growth for them as well. Going all the way up to using AI on a weekly basis or more often, which has obviously become a big thing in just the last 3 years. And you're seeing even from year to year, we are really getting an awful lot of growth there of the audience discovering AI and actually using it in their lives. So that's pretty impressive, right? Okay, so I want to put a pin in a bunch of things, literally, because I think these are reasonably important things to talk about. And right up there, number one is AI, which I have touched on before. Number two is the growth of HD radio. This is as high as it's ever been. Why is that? Well, Steve Newberry can tell you. Q just finished a big research study that they do every year where they look at gadgets that are equipped in the 100 most popular vehicles every year, and HD radio was way up in that survey as well. Podcasts doesn't have a number last year, and the reason is we changed the wording to the point where we felt we couldn't trend it, but one in three respondents listen to podcasts on a weekly basis. Owning a connected car with an infotainment system, that's four of every 10 people now. That's up 5 points over last year. Also important, the smart speaker gain, which I indicated earlier, went from 39% last year to 45% this year. YouTube. YouTube has not been on this pyramid for a variety of reasons. We used to think of it as a social media site. We think it's bigger than that now. So now we see 62% of all respondents in our survey using YouTube on a weekly basis. I've got more data on that I think you're going to really want to see. And then short videos. This is a newish question. How often do you actually watch short videos in the course of a normal week? Well, 71% do so on a weekly basis, which is pretty high. And then smart TVs, which we talked about before, a real big deal. So this is the overall pyramid. We crank them out for all the different formats. They are in the exact same order. So here is hot AC. And what you can do is actually, like I'm going to do in a second, toggle back and forth between the total pyramid and hot AC. And you can see some of these bands widen or narrow depending on how often these things are owned and used. So this becomes helpful. And then for radio station stakeholders that actually buy their data, they get their own pyramid. Here's WRMF, the Hubbard Hot AC in West Palm Beach, Florida. And so the RMF folks can toggle back and forth between the hot AC format overall, all 2,700 people, and then this group of 245, nice sample, of their own audience. So you kind of get a real good idea of where your radio station stands in the overall universe of things. Fun with pyramids. This is a dual pyramid, millennials on the left, boomers on the right. The question is, what do millennials do more than boomers when we're talking technology now? And what do boomers do more than millennials, if anything? Looking at millennials first, wow, look at all those little icons. Who are those icons? One of the millennial symbols of today, Timothy Chalamet, the actor who is dying to win an Oscar and somehow still hasn't won one yet. So anytime you see a Chalamet here on the left-hand side, that is an indicator of much higher use among millennials than boomers. And there's a whole lot of Chalamets going on the left-hand side of this particular graphic. And some of them are really radically different from one another. Even YouTube, 17-point difference. Look at the short video slot, 62% for boomers, 86% for millennials. So are there anything that boomers do more than millennials? Well, there's a guy who's actually won Oscars and doesn't show up for them, and that's Sean Penn, who in fact is on the younger end of the baby boomer spectrum. And when you look at our four little Sean Penns here, it's for watching TV, listening to the radio, reading online newsletters, and subscribing to satellite radio, quite a bit higher there. So again, just another way of looking at the data and understanding it. That's really what the goal is. Okay. Um, Visuals. Here we are in radio where we've all been taught that that your words communicate pictures, and you need to tell stories with your words. But more and more over the years, radio is getting so much more visually focused, and we're going to take a look at where that's happening and why everything is becoming more visual. So the question here is the short video question, and you can see it written down there at the bottom. The question is, how often do you watch short videos when you're online on your phone or wherever. And the pink slice up on top are people who say, I do that several times a day. That's 1 in 5. And 1 in 4 watch short videos on a daily basis. We add those together. Now, last year we asked the question too. It's up 5 points to 47%, as you can see. And look at the generational trajectory. Clearly, short videos. And this is how platforms like Snapchat and TikTok came into being, really on short videos. And you can see how popular they are among younger people. But they're also popular among older people, too. I mean, Xers are over the 50% mark, boomers are up to 37%. Lots of people are watching short videos online these days, even though we are radio. Here it is just broken down by format so you could get a little bit more granular here, but the formats that really lead the way in terms of consume their audiences consuming short videos, whoops, are CHR, Hot AC, and Rock. Those are the three leading formats. But again, I would submit to you that all these numbers are significant. How often do you watch audio on your smart TV? This is another one that we picked up from focus groups. We would talk to people who would tell us they don't have a working radio at home. And we would ask them, well, do you ever listen then to your favorite radio station at home? And a number of people started telling us, yeah, I do on my TV. So that's kind of interesting. It may have started with those Music Now channels and stuff that come with a number of cable systems, but at any rate, as you can see, 13% say they do so frequently. 1 in 4 say they do so occasionally. Yes, last year was the first year we asked it. It's up 4 points this year to 38%. Women a little bit more likely. And again, as we commonly see, it is young people who start these tech trends and then they kind of gravitate older. Here's another video aspect of something that used to be just audio podcasts, right? When podcasts came into being, they were absolutely audio, and now all of a sudden, many podcasts are done video versions. So the question is there a there for podcast videos? So that was the question we asked. 17% in light green, right up there near the top of the hour, say I frequently watch my favorite podcasts already. That's 17%, as I mentioned. 1 in 4 do so occasionally. We've asked this now the last 4 years. This is a trend, you guys. I mean, a pretty unmistakable trend. This is definitely a trend. And again, look at the generations here. There's no question about what is going on here. So if your podcast is supposed to be connecting with younger people, it almost compels you to look to see if there is a way to do a video version of it. And here's our YouTube questions that I alluded to earlier. These are brand new. We have never asked these in this way before. How often do you use YouTube? About a third do so daily. 3 of 10, almost 3 of 10 do so weekly. That's 62%. I mean, it's a pretty huge cum audience, right? Dominated by men and clearly younger people, as you can see there on the generational pullout. Here are the formats that are most YouTube oriented. Sports and rock. There's your guys. Sports and rock. Those are the ones that really print. And then here's another interesting one. Does the station that sent you the survey, your favorite station, have its own YouTube channel? And about a quarter say, yes, they do, and I visit them frequently. About a third almost say, yes, I do, and I visit occasionally. And again, you can just see the way the demographics break down there. The question, though, that I wanted to find the answer to that hopefully will help you is what are the use cases? What do people actually go to YouTube for? And it turns out the number one kind of video that people watch on YouTube are those videos that teach you how to tie a Windsor knot or to change the oil in your 1997 Miata, right? Those are the questions that people are clearly looking for answers to on YouTube. But the next two are music related, watching music videos of artists and songs. or playing music videos of artists and songs while you're cleaning the house or making dinner or doing those kinds of things. So you can see the pecking order going down there. I think it's important for those of you who either have YouTube channels or thinking about doing those to think about what are the use cases? Why does your audience go to YouTube anyway? And is there a way that maybe you can match up your content to some of the stuff that they're already watching? You may actually be able to do that. Here's Steve Newberry's favorite segment here. Cars, specifically cars that have infotainment system. This is becoming obviously very prevalent in the radio industry, and it is definitely having an impact on people listening to the radio in cars. So here's the question. Do you have an actual in-car media system in the vehicle that you drive or lease right now? We go back to 2018 on this when only about 1 in 4 did, all the way up to 4 of every 10. You can see it's been going pretty straight up, and then boom, car sales definitely driving this. It's almost impossible even to buy an entry-level vehicle without an infotainment system at this point. And I've got the formats again. It's dominated by our two big male formats, sports and rock. Clearly more likely to be able to want to buy a vehicle like this. And these are systems like Ford Sync and Audi Connect. I mean, they unfortunately all have their own proprietary systems, which is another research study that Q has actually done. But this gives you an idea of who has one. So, what are people actually listening to in their cars? We asked them to think back to their favorite radio station and a weekday from the past week. We give them a list of all the different audio sources they could listen to in the car. And again, using our drop-down menus, we ask them to tell us how much time do you spend on each. So you can see clearly number one is people listening to their car radio when they are behind the wheel or in the passenger seat. That's 50% of consumption in the car. Number two, distantly, is satellite radio, 20% of consumption. Then we've got streaming audio coming from somewhere. Oops, sorry about that. At 10%, personal music, 8%, podcast, 5%, talking books, 5%. But you add them all together, and you've got, as you just saw there on the box upper right, whoops, AM/FM car radio at 50%, but other audio at 48%. So it's already close. And that 50% mark for AM/FM car radio is in jeopardy of continuing to go down. In fact, you take a look at the overall percentage of people listening to AM/FM radio in their car since 2018, and it has slid from 62% of consumption all the way down to 50%. And the problem is, are these infotainment systems. When people get a vehicle that they can pair their phone or that has free satellite radio for a number of months, they pig out on this new content. They want to hear what's going on, and they're going to sample it, and they're going to definitely, in some ways, peel off or certainly take advantage of some of the options they have in their cars. And I think this is a fascinating contrast here because on the left, you've already seen this. This is the percentage of people who actually have infotainment systems, right? It's gone from 24 to 40%. And on the right, this is what has happened to the percentage of people listening to their car radios over these same period of years. And there's no question it's going down almost proportionately to in-car media systems going up. So this is a real concern. This is what Steve's company does, and this is a trend. Metadata in the dashboard is another way that vehicles are becoming visualized. Now, there are a number of car manufacturers. You know, we go to CES every year where they are putting, 8K screens in BMWs. So while you're charging your car, you can, basically watch Jaws in as high quality as you can get it in your man cave at home. It is truly remarkable. what is going on with that. But the ability to be able to actually message on the dashboard is really important for radio. And let me show you some data real quick. First question is, does your car's dashboard have the ability to display artist and title? More than 80% say yes, it does. And then we ask these folks, when your car dashboard is displaying something, do you pay attention to it? And 1 in 4 there in purple say, yeah, I pay close attention to dashboard messaging. 3 of every 10 in green there say I pay above average attention. You add those together, it's up to 54%. That is 5% uh, percentage points higher than last year. Women more likely to notice metadata messaging. And again, the age demographics continue the trend where younger people lead the way there. And probably not surprisingly, music station fans too. Spoken word stations do not use metadata anywhere near as much as music stations do. It clearly takes more work to message special guests and sports scores and all of those kinds of things. In fact, that actually takes us to our next question. What would people actually like to see displayed on their dashboards? So here we go. These are the people who are very interested in each of the elements you see going down the left-hand side. So obviously, song title and artist are table stakes there, number one in green at 67%. But then you've got emergency information. Isn't that what news radio stations were supposed to do, right? Emergency weather, breaking news alerts, breaking traffic alerts. We got a lot of people in the audience say, you know what? It wouldn't be such a bad thing to be able to just glance down and see there's a tornado coming, or the stock market just lost 800 points, or we just invaded something, or whatever the case may be. So here you definitely have the pecking order of what people want to see. This is going to vary by demographic. Again, stakeholders who purchase their data have an opportunity to actually see what their discrete audiences really want to do. And then our last point here, I'm trying to stay as on time as I can, even though I'm beginning to run a little late, is what is going on with AI. And what we're seeing is this interesting kind of co-relationship. People are using AI more, but their alarm rate in terms of how concerned they are about AI has not changed a bit in the past 3 years. So let me show you what that looks like. First question is, do you use AI for work, school, or personal use? In green there, you can see 15% do so daily, 14% do so weekly. Yep, we add them together. And you can see it's a 3x jump from 2 years ago and a 2x jump from last year. And I know you're probably encountering the same things with family members. I mean, it means nothing to me when people in my workplace are using Chat GPT or Claude. But when I go to a family dinner and there's people quite a bit older than me talking about how they are using this stuff to answer basic questions about their finances or God knows what else, it really tells me how quickly this stuff is in fact catching on. Men more than women, millennials more than our other generations here. And then the question we've been asking the last few years, based on what you know about AI, which of these best describes your feeling in terms of the way AI is progressing? 1/3 very alarmed by the way AI is progressing, a similar percentage somewhat alarmed. Add them up, you can see we've been in that same range now since we first started asking this question back in 2024. Even though a lot of people are using AI and becoming personally comfortable with asking it questions and all that, when they think about it more globally, when they think about it more from 35,000 feet, the alarm level hasn't changed. Women are clearly more flipped out over AI than are men. And interestingly, younger people are as well. Why all the Gen Zs there? Well, I think it probably has to do with the last data slide that I'm going to show you. It's a brand new question. More and more, I'm worried about losing my job to AI. Only 6% strongly agree. Easy for me to say only 6%. 6% is not insignificant. 11% agree. So 17% are in that zone of being really uncomfortable with AI from the standpoint of feeling their job may be threatened. But look at our demographics here. Look at Gen Z. And part of this is because it seems like every article that's written talks about Gen Z is going to pay the price for AI and all these entry-level jobs are going to disappear. And they're reading these articles and or they're actually feeling the actual pain, if you will, of what is going on with AI and their jobs. All right, a bonus question. You may remember a few months ago, iHeart started using a slogan at the top of their hour that all the industry trades covered. And why not? I mean, it's not, again, the typical thing that you hear at the top of the hour on most radio stations. It was the phrase guaranteed human, which was obviously a bit of pushback against AI. So I had a client come to me and go, "Are you going to ask that on Techsurvey just to see whether it's a good testing slogan or not? I mean, are they doing the right thing over there at iHeart or what?" So I thought, all right, well, let's do that, but let's mix it up with some other slogans that we come up with. So we wrote a few others and we tested them all. So the question is, and you can see it up on top in italics below a series of statements that your favorite station might make to counter the competition from digital media and newer audio platforms. For each, please rate how much each statement resonates with you. The number one statement that of the ones we tested that worked out the best was it's free, no subscription required. 72% gave that a 5 on a 1 to 5 scale. Now, have we tested something like this in the past? We have. And that's why I threw it in here. I had a feeling it would do pretty well in context. And in fact, it is a very popular statement. You could start using this tonight and certainly not hurt yourself. This number two, just barely. Our music is curated by people, not bots. Number three, right there is the iHeart slogan, guaranteed human. I mean, this is a good score at 62%. And you can see the other two down the order there. So again, just trying to give you some information that hopefully can help your strategic conversations and how you think about your radio stations and your audiences. Let me wrap up the big eight takeaways here for Techsurvey 2026, and I'll send you on your merry way. We appreciate you being here today. Again, you saw those net promoter recommendation scores took a nice upturn. It was great to see that 48. But now the industry has to perform consistently well in order to keep this streak alive. There's never been a better time to be brilliant at the basics here. The competition has never been stiffer, and if you want to continue to earn recommendations, you definitely have to earn it. Clearly, we saw radio's got some momentum, but I think it's time that we really kind of wrapped our heads around the idea that the real competition for radio isn't up or down the FM dial at 107.1 or that other country station at 92.5. It is all the other competitive threats from the world of digital put out by a lot of people with a lot of funding in many cases. And we're talking everything from podcasts to streams to satellite radio to everything else. That's your real competition these days. Yes, the local vibe matters. It really does help to differentiate radio at a really important time in the history of the medium. What is different about radio? Radio is local, and radio done right reflects, holds up the mirror to its local community. So if you've kind of pulled off of this or slacked off of this, this is something to kind of reinvest in, especially now that the warmer weather is definitely on its way. So yeah, I mean, I still have these conversations where I talk to people who say, well, I'm not sure digital is really viable. We don't make as much money on it, and it's harder for us to sell. So I think about that and I look at some of our data here, especially those pie charts where you see digital catching up very, very closely to the way that people listen to radio stations like yours. So it's obvious what's happening here. Wayne Gretzky can point to where the puck is moving. It has already moved to digital, and we got to get on the train. And in order to actually get good at number four, we've got to meet the audience where they are. I mean, we have to understand, and again, that's why we do the pyramids. We want to make sure you understand where your audience is when they're not listening to you. And if there's a way you can be in that space, whether it's on their smart speakers or on their iPhones or whatever the case may be, that meeting the audience where they are is critical because you can't be everywhere. You can't check off every box, especially with great content. So sometimes you have to pick and choose your priorities here. But that one way to do it, obviously, is having reliable data. Then we talked about radio's visuals, and this is becoming a bigger deal, whether it's radio on smart TVs or video podcasts or short videos that your team can produce. I think a videographer or a video editor or a video producer ought to be the next big hire that a lot of radio stations and companies make. Obviously, in-car infotainment systems are just growing by leaps and bounds. And this is ultimately a threat to us in radio because the reality, of course, here is that the more options people have in the car, the more they're going to use them. So we got to make sure that we are really providing a service in the car they can't get from Spotify and they can't get from that reggae station in Belize. So this is where we have to figure out what it is we're supposed to actually deliver here. And I think local personality and just local content in general is a pretty good starting point. And then again, we saw AI clearly gaining usage, but over time, people are still pretty freaked out by AI, and they're probably going to be for some time to come. There's still so many scary AI articles. And it's not just hype scary, scary for a reason. So, Brave New World, right? All that stuff. Here's how to reach us. If you have any questions, we haven't been, I know I've seen a bunch of hands going up. And and I'm sure some of you are using the chat, and we will take a look at that. But if you want to reach out to me personally, I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. That's my email address, three from the top there, fred@jacobsmedia.com. Like to thank Inside Radio again for partnering with us this year. Oh, Q, we love you. Thank you so much for making this part of your content program as well. We really absolutely positively appreciate that. Thanks to my staff, Jason Hollins, Elnora Lowe, Chris Brunt, of course, Paul Jacobson, Bill Jacobson, Mike Stern. I hope I haven't missed anybody, but everybody pitches in to do a little something for this. Thank you for being here. Have a great day, and we appreciate you. Bye-bye.